Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you're joining, and welcome to Deploy. I hope you're enjoying the Deploy already. My name is Sachin, and I am a senior product marketing manager here at DigitalOcean. In this talk, we will discuss and answer some questions around adoption of Kubernetes for startups. Since this sounds like the talk of the town at the moment, and you might have heard most of these questions floating, say VCs are betting big on Kubernetes. Don't delay, move your setup now. Hence, we are gonna take similar questions, but the answers will be more realistic, transparent, and with examples so that you can decide what works and fits best for you. We will get on some questions such as does Kubernetes fit to startups? Why to move to Kubernetes? When to move to Kubernetes and how to move to Kubernetes? That's very important. Why adopting to Kubernetes is an investment you should see as success stories from our own customers and the summary. But before we go to the meat of the content, uh, we need to understand who am I telling you this, right? As a product marketing manager, I lead the vertical for cloud native and Kubernetes space. Before this, I was with the customer success and the technical team where I have spoken to startups and SMBs. I have been a part of their migration journey, architecture reviews. I have been in the developer space for some time now. As I used to speak to startups, uh, there was a lot of interest in dipping toes into Kubernetes, but also some anxiety about whether it was appropriate for the particular use case. How did the other company use it? Was it difficult to learn? What were the development team's experience of working with it? Lot of questions from the CTOs and CXOs, overall the decision makers. Sometimes there were also horror stories of bad implementations and fears that keeps us away from moving to Kubernetes. Let's uncover, I would say, uncover what works best for you. Before everything, this is the thing you could have heard, obviously, that Kubernetes is definitely a big buzzword these days, and you should not adopt it because it is cool, or you have fear of missing out, the FOMO, which has been trending. Startups and Kubernetes is not a fit. This is what many people will say, right? Often I hear some of these very reasonable sentences with like doubts uh, alongside a desire to basically keep deployment simple. But what I am saying here is completely different. While they might have good reasons for saying such thing, it's wrong to mention that startups should not look at Kubernetes. Let's understand this trade-off by taking two words, two simple words, and it'll be clear: agility, scalability. Agility, startups are agile and flexible, which means you can move fast and break things. At the other hand, we have Kubernetes, which is hard and complex, and adopting it at the early start will slow you down. Whereas if we talk about scalability, that means startups also aspire to and often have to scale fast, especially if you have raised capital to scale fast. It is obviously necessary to be scalable, and that means to have the technological setup at the back that is able to handle your growth. You can't stay behind, and most certainly can't wait for your system to grow and become legacy. That's gonna be bad. During the course of the presentation, this is what we will try to answer. What's the right point in time and how to grow faster, keeping the keeping the scalability while also not compromising on your agility. We will revisit this at the end of the presentation. Kubernetes pays for itself. Let's understand this. You can see the adoption of Kubernetes as an investment. We You will face some upfront cost associated with adoption, as with any investment, right? Cost and interest. So you will face some upfront cost. Say, suppose training your engineers, necessary changes of the existing software, and thus reduced short-term productivity. However, over time, you will earn interest for this investment, such as more stability of your system, shorter release cycles, or lower computing resources cost. This is going to be the interest part. As with every investment, you need to analyze it, if it is worth investing, and if yes, when to invest, right? Assuming that at some point you need to invest in the Kubernetes adoption to be able to scale further, you should keep in mind that your cost of the adoption increases over time. So you have the upfront cost, you have the interest, and you cannot leave it that I'm going to move in future, because the adoption is going to increase over time. Now, this is because your company gets bigger and bigger. You will have more engineers that needs to be trained, more elaborate software that needs to be adapted, and more users to be migrated to the new system. So no leaving to the future at the moment. As an open to world example, since everyone knows about Tinder, uh, Tinder moved to Kubernetes when it already reached a significant scale, and it took them 2 years to finish the whole migration. You can imagine. So, if you are still new and have not achieved, say, massive scale, it'll be much faster and easier for you. And this everything is available on Medium as a source, so it's like completely open to the world example, and it fits in well. Still, an increasing price for the investment does not necessarily mean that you should invest immediately. You rather have to compare the price to your opportunity cost. Is that the cost associated by investing your time and money in adopting Kubernetes instead of focusing on other parts of the business? It can thus be very hard to exactly determine when to take this step, right? But I will try to give you recommendation for what you should consider and what is the best timing from my point of view. So let's discuss about how to move to Kubernetes, when to move to Kubernetes, and some of the success stories overall. When to move to Kubernetes. As a startup, time is very scarce and important resource. We all know that. Adopting Kubernetes will cost you some time. It is wrong to say that it'll be very easier, but adopting will cost you some time. For this same reason, I believe you should not adopt Kubernetes when time is most critical, and that is at very early stages. If you are still looking for product market fit or even the right idea, you should focus on validation and build MVPs as fast and as simple as possible to get feedback. Say, at very early stages, if you focus your attention to configuration management, and uh, I will have, say, 100 engineers, and um, the team will grow. So assuming, I mean, having that as a assumption as aspiration is good, but with that assumption, I cannot just immediately start focusing on configuration management, CI/CD, auto scaling, having like service mesh at the start. These topics can divert you from the primary goal of your application. So no mesh at start, definitely. Hence, I would say in any case, all of this stage, the very early stage of the startup life is too early to look at Kubernetes, and it will probably distract you. And its benefit of scalability and stability are not relevant yet. Now, the second stage, or the second stage would be, once you have found a product market fit, the next step for startups is to scale. At this point, Kubernetes becomes interesting and relevant. Especially for tech startups, this is a good time to start with Kubernetes as the transition is still manageable and you do not have a complicated system yet. Here, the only challenge that you might face is to actually make the investment to rebuild the parts of your system, as it is very easy to find reasons to postpone it. Like, say, suppose I'm going to get next funding or financing, next feature release, or any other artificial milestone. However, don't delay it much. Delaying this step further and further makes it only harder to reach, and you will build an ever increasing legacy system that becomes difficult to migrate later on. That's the overall problem. So, very early stages, no. Idea stages, no. Product market fit, aspiration to scale faster, have got the funding. Overall, it is a yes, but don't delay on the things. That's the overall thing for this slide on how to when to move to Kubernetes. Now, let's understand on like I have decided on the when part of the things. Let's understand on how to move to Kubernetes. Now, I won't go into much technical detail on how to adopt Kubernetes, like writing a writing a YAML file. But there are some general recommendations that will help you to do it the right way. Say, keep it simple. Don't go with all the abundance of features and configuration that comes with Kubernetes. Take care of only what's important at first. Use tools and offer that's right for you. Go for more open source and pre-made solutions. The Kubernetes community is one of the most vibrant open source communities out there, and there are already so many great open source solutions for many use cases. So use that, and for this, try to also build on these solutions as much as you can, as they will save you a lot of work and often stabilize best practices. Use a public cloud and go for managed offerings that saves time for you, because time is very critical with managed offerings. Like I mean, a lot of public cloud offerings are managed these days, like DigitalOcean Kubernetes. You actually get a scale in your hand and do not compromise on agility as well. The problem that we had discussed in the third slide, you get reduced operations overhead. Managing self hosted clusters requires expertise, time, and resources that many small businesses lack. DigitalOcean Kubernetes does the heavy lifting by continuously monitoring your Kubernetes control plane to make sure you are always able to access and deploy to your cluster. Faster time to market. Leveraging a managed version of the Kubernetes will allow you, as developers and businesses, to take advantage of the containerized application deployment, leading to the faster time to market as the byproduct. Apart from the reduced operations overhead, faster time to market, you get no lock in, you get worry free maintenance, and you also have a fixed and predictable pricing that is not a surprise at the end of the month. But consider what you would pay to have an engineer manually bringing up nodes, right? The amount of time lost to these purely infra changes is simply taking time away from developing your product. Let's make this trade off a little more concrete with some real examples. I just want to give you some inspiration about some similar size startups choosing and making decision at the right point in time. Atom Learning. Atom Learning provides high quality education for primary school students through a fully adaptive learning platform. It was founded by Jake and Alex in 2018, I guess. Having uh, been frustrated by uh, e- the inequality in education provision in the UK and globally, they kind of saw huge potential for technology to reduce the gap in attainment between the most and the least privileged. Hence, they launched their platform Atom Nucleus, a personalized, AI integrated home learning site to prepare kids worldwide for school entrance exams. Atom Learning second platform, Atom Prime, came in just like in 1.5 years, and was used by almost 400 UK and international schools, and included like virtual classroom sessions. As the user base grew, so did the internal team, like 4 to 6, and the need for the more sustainable code management and documentation. The maintenance and scaling with the monolithic architecture was very difficult. We all know that. They needed a way to easily maintain and scale the platform as the user base grew. The team at Atom Learning containerized the monolithic into microservices, the set of pods, and made it a deployment inside DigitalOcean Kubernetes. That design pattern allowed them to move much faster than maintaining Droplet and Kubernetes, because having everything in one cluster made transitions easy to do it in small stages. The decision taken by CTO Tim and his team to adopt Kubernetes at this stage where the demand for the software exploded was at the right point in time. The second example is the classic example of scale. Hack the Box runs on DigitalOcean Kubernetes. They provide advanced training for IT security professionals and hackers. They have seen tremendous growth over the last 4 years. They have been the early adopters of Kubernetes. User base has grown to almost 750K platform members and more than 800 organizations. I love that quote from James. James, the CTO, has been a long time user of Kubernetes, and he has used it as developer. He has enjoyed all the flexibility, and imagine after enjoying all the flexibility and independence, someone moving to manage Kubernetes. So, um, if the question is why did they move to Kubernetes, that was because of one of their popular offering or the platform offering which is called as challenges, and which kind of offered singular applications. They kind of focused on different hacking fields across diverse categories and scalable difficulties. When users solve challenges, and they are kind of rewarded with points at that particular thing. But and as the Hack the Box team grew, the challenge platform they provided to the users began hitting some performance bottlenecks. Now, initially, they created this in Docker environment, and then they transitioned this to Docker Swarm. But even then, they had limitations in performance. So the Hack the Box team transitioned to Kubernetes, completely replacing the Docker and Docker Swarm environment with DigitalOcean's managed Kubernetes offering. Overall summary advice, this is on a very high level. So, high level advice for should not. When looking for a product market fit or the idea stage, no. It's going to be a overkill if you do it for simple WordPress sites, CMS, etc. Because it is cool and everybody is doing it, please don't do it. The high level advice on when you should, if you're a tech startup, found the product market fit and aspire to scale massively, such as SaaS, e-commerce, you should adopt it. You should rather find the right point in time as well, and have clear strategy on why and how you want to adopt it. When you go for it, use simple solutions like open source software, existing tools, and public clouds at the beginning, so that you avoid as many mistakes as possible. If you are a startup, you almost certainly fall into that category. You might be small right now, but you want to grow. It's what you tell investors, right? And it's the reason you're hiring so many developers. Your system is going to change and expand quickly. You want to build it in a way that allows this with the least amount of added cost and friction possible. So remember that. Kubernetes is a very solid future proof solution. Since it becomes more and more effort to adopt Kubernetes if your system grows, it often makes sense to invest some time into it relatively soon after you've found the product market fit. That's all I'll say here. So, thank you for listening to me again. My name is Sachin, and I hope that this was helpful. You can find me on chat as well as Discord, where I'll be answering all of your questions after the session as well. Happy coding to you if you're a developer. Good luck and all the best if you're in startup owner. I know there's a lot that's happening. Thank you again and have a great deploy, everyone.